Good morning, it's Friday the 19th of June and it's about 11:30 in the morning. I should be sitting down at the Felt at the casino playing live, but there's been a change of plan. Let me show you. Because it's so hot today, this young lady's walkers have cancelled. So after doing 2 days of daddy daycare when the boy was off sick, I'm now Friday having doggy daycare. Hey, you awake? Yeah, there she is. She's all right. Just very hot. Wag wag. So you're trying to find a nice cool space. So change of plan. I'm going to play tomorrow on Saturday. Managed to negotiate a pass for that. But yeah, on with today. Okay, so what I thought I would do today now would be to put down my thoughts on imposition range C betting. I've referred to it a few times already in relation to some of my other posts, but I just thought I would walk through some spots where we have a thick value hand and in essence an air bluff, just to show why having a range C bet can be utilized in both different situations in order to optimize our returns, even though they're very, very different lines. So here goes. So fundamentally, when playing live low stakes poker, players, when we are in position, and we'll just try and utilize a button opening versus a big blind call, opposition players respond badly to a C bet. More often than not, they call too wide. They're not aggressive enough in their check raising. And when they do check raise, they predominantly have either very, very strong made hands or often very strong combination type draws. And so you can use this to your advantage around your repeatable thought process and ranging your opponent for how your hand can then respond to their own responses to your range C bet. Okay, so as I go through this, I'm actually going to utilize Flopzilla, which is basically a ranging tool to try to demonstrate how villains' ranges get dragged through the different streets based on the bet sizes that we're using, both for the value example, but also for the bluff example, and to just refine where we need to change our approaches depending on whether or not we've got thick value or bluff in order to actually optimize the value that we can actually get out of the entire hand. So in Flopzilla, it allows you to actually input ranges, which is on the left hand side of the screen, and then to put in a board, flop, and then turns and rivers, and then to see how the buckets that a player has, whether they're over pairs or top pairs or flush draws, how they change through the hand as the hand progresses, depending on which cards come out on the flop, turn and river. So what I've done here is I've actually just put in a very simple but very wide range for a recreational player calling a raise in the big blind. The range is very wide, so basically any suited ace, king, queen down to 10-5, 9-5, double gappers, all the pocket pairs, every single ace-x unsuited variety, and then a couple of offsuit connectors, and down to about what's that? Queen 9, something like that. So that's where we're going to start. It's a bit of assumption, but let's start from that position. In this first hand, we pick up pocket queens on the button. It folds around to us and we open up to 12 and we get called by Mr. Cod in the big blind. The flop comes down 10-5-2 flush draw. So a very wet and dynamic board. Wet because there's quite a lot of draws out there. Dynamic because there are many cards, over cards, flushing cards, straightening cards that can actually change the nuts. It gets checked to us and we range c-bet. So for argument's sake, I'm going to bet 10 here into 25 and Mr. Cod calls. Now, going small with that range c-bet is trying to also entice Mr. Cod to raise off his strong hands, like his sets, maybe some of his two pairs, maybe even some of his very strong combo draws that might actually get raised. Also, he's going to overcall, so his weaker range, any pocket pairs, gut shots, even most of his ace highs are likely to get called. The turn comes down to brick 8 of diamonds. He checks to me, and this is where we put on a brick against his range a big overbet. We consider that Mr. Cod is going to have a whole range of inelastic hands. These are going to be potentially good flush draws, good straight draws, combination draws of flushes and straights, maybe pair plus draw hands, and a number of 10x type hands, ace 10, king 10, queen 10, that he's still likely to call that overbet with. So we can actually ignore all of the air and the smaller pocket pairs and weaker pairs. We don't mind if they actually fold out. What we're trying to concentrate on here is his inelastic hands, his top pairs, and his good draws. So we want to get those to the river whilst charging him a lot of money to do so. He calls. The river then is really a brick 7, and you'll see why this is really a brick in a minute. He checks. So we still have an overpair. We still have thick value here. All his draws have gone. There are some random straights he might have in there, but it's a really small percentage, and he's unlikely to have other stronger hands. There might be a very small percentage here of some random 2 pair that he's fallen into, or maybe a set of 8s. So we're going to go for value. We're going to go for value against his 10x. So in order to get a 10 here to fold, say king 10, queen 10, how large are we going to have to go? I think we're going to have to go pretty large here, somewhere in the order of about 250. All in would probably get a fold. So in order to get a call, we have to go somewhere smaller than that. I would aim for about 180 to try to get a call from a good 10. And he obliges. And he shows king 10 of diamonds. So here we probably extricated the best value out of this particular opportunity that we had. In this example, we open up right at the bottom of our range, jack 6 suited from the button. Unlikely to get 3-bet, and of course Mr. Cod calls. The flop comes over exactly the same as in the value example. We completely whiff this. We have got basically air here. He checks to us. We range c-bet. for the same incentives, try and get him to raise off his really strong hands, call with his weaker range. He obliges with a call. The brick 8 comes in. He's unlikely to have any very strong hands here, but he has got probably a lot of inelastic hands. Again, flush draws, straight draws, combo draws, good 10x, those sorts of hands that we can actually get to call and take to the river. Depending on what happens, we've got a good possible bluffing line here. He checks. We overbet like we did with the value. He calls. What's his range? Well, he's got probably some very good combo draws, flush draws to the ace or the king. He's got probably quite good 10x hands here. So when on the river, it bricks out with a 7 and all of his draws miss, unless a very random straight draw that he might have held on with, his range is predominantly going to be 10x and maybe just a small percentage of hands like a set of 8s that he might have just backed into randomly on that turn. So when he checks to us, which he does, we go, if we wanted to get him to call with a 10x, we might go about 180 like we did in the value hand. So if we want 10x to fold here, what should we do? Well, we're probably going to go somewhere in excess of pot. I'm guessing that probably we would go more towards about 250. The stack to pot ratio here is about 1.5. There are a few brick walls that we could run into, but the percentage of those is actually very small. So let's just jam it all in and we get him to fold. And he had king 10 of diamonds. He folded. We win. I'm now going to assume that even the most passive of players would have 3-bet me with this top part of their range. So aces, kings, let's say queens, ace king suited, ace king off. So they actually come out of their range. I then put the board in here, which is 10-5 deuce flush draw, and what it does is it then calculates the percentage of hands that fall into different buckets. Now, the largest proportion over here is actually a whole bunch of no-made hands. So in essence, air. There's a hell of a lot of ace highs because both the suited variety and the offsuit variety are in his range. And then there's a whole bunch of pairs. There's a few flush draws and then some gut shots and stuff like that that are floating around. So that is the range that ultimately this player would have called my original raise first in with. Okay, let's first of all go to the flop and see how the range works there. In both example hands, I range bet small on the flop. My C bet was a small £10 C bet. I'm going to assume that on this very wet and dynamic board that even the most passive player is probably going to raise off any sets that they have. So I'll remove that on the filter here. Any 2 pair they may have. And also fold all of the air that they probably have. So get rid of that filter there. It means they're calling any top pair hand, other pocket pairs, middle pairs, weak pairs, all of the ace highs, and all of the various draws that they still have. The thing to note here is that the no-made hand actually really reduces down to basically the draws. That's a fairly dominant chunk. the ace highs are extremely prevalent, and then it's top pair. So they are the major buckets. So ace highs, top pairs, and these various draws. And this is the same situation for both the value and the bluff line. And now on to the turn. Set the filters on, see what happens with that big overbet. So when the eight of diamonds comes on the turn as a brick, and we put in the overbet, what is villain going to do? Well, they are probably going to be folding middle pairs, weak pairs, any random ace highs, other no-made hands. Gut shots will probably go, random overcards will probably go. So this means that villain's range has become very condensed into a few buckets. So nearly 50% here of his range comprises top pair, so 10x of something. All right? And the rest is predominantly related to either remaining flush draws, that's him assuming it is calling all flush draws, and a few open-ended straight draws that are dotted around. Now, he could have stumbled into a set of eights, and he could have stumbled into a small percentage of two pairs here and here. But there's such a small proportion of his range that we shouldn't really be worried about it. So that large overbet has allowed us to very efficiently put villain's range into the summary buckets. Top pairs, draws, and a few very, very strong hands. And that's his range. And finally to the river, where the incentives of our hand changes, whether it's the value side or the bluff side. Now look what happens on the river when the brick 7 of clubs comes in. All of the flush draws that are over here and the straight draws disappear. And that really consolidates down villain's remaining range to basically nearly 80% of top pair hands, which is anything with a 10 in it, a few sets, so eights, some random two pairs that have come in, these are the purple ones here, and just a small percentage of random straights that have actually got there. But predominantly his range is now comprising of top pair, which is why on both the value and the bluff lines we can anchor on that top pair in order to either get a call or a fold, depending on what we would do with the inverse situation. So that big overbet on the turn really does condense down villain's range, and when the brick comes in on the river, that 7 of clubs, his range is near enough face up, apart from a small proportion of his range where he's hit some very, very strong hands, which quite frankly we can't really be too concerned about if we run into those. Hopefully that was fairly instructive, that in a very simple strategy with a range C bet, and then in this particular situation with a brick turn, we can have the same action against a number of inelastic hands that the big blind has kept, with a big overbet on both, for both the value and the bluff situation, in order to drag that range to the river, and where another brick comes in, we realise that somewhere around about 80% of his range that he's actually got left, because all these draws have gone. So, you know, we don't need to worry about those. They're going to fold anyway, whatever we do. But we can concentrate then on the bucket of 10x. So in the value example with a pair of queens, we want to understand what do we think we could bet to actually get a 10 to fold, and then we inverse that, go slightly smaller to get a call. But with the bluffing example, we go the other way. We go, okay, what am I going to do to get a 10 to call? How large would I need to go in order to get a 10 to fold? And that provides the calibration for us. I should also say that the overbet here in this situation with the brick on the turn is really good for the bluff, because some of the best bluffs are those where you can make the most money by actually getting the player to call a large overbet on the turn and then fold him on the river. That way you can actually make more money from your bluffs as well. So I hope that's been fairly instructive. The interaction between the different hands, value, bluff, looking at that as well in the ranging tool Flopzilla, just to help to highlight how those buckets move through the hands. So hopefully like, subscribe, keep going with more content, give me some feedback, some comments, take care of yourselves, and for me, going to see how it goes on Saturday, but enjoy your weekends. All right, take care. See you later. Thank you.